Okay,
guys, I think we're going to get started here. So welcome everyone to another session of Cake, and welcome to our online audience who's going to be watching live. And this time we have an extra little addition. Our camera is clipped up with a nasty clamp from the business Nasty Clamps that you can see here on the little screen for you guys. Which is kindly donated by one of our new Cake members, which is great and works great. It's a little curvy clamp that actually just clamps onto a table. It's really useful.
Maybe Matthew wants to give a 2-second overview of the nasty clamp?
Maybe when we come back for the workshop portion or something like that, just so we can hop back into this. It's great though. Thanks so much for the donation, by the way. Just an overview of Cake, as we always do. Cake is sort of a down and dirty, really practical business workshop, especially for starting without funding, kind of bootstrapping yourself and getting going from the ground up. And the emphasis really is on tactics that you can put to immediate use, and hopefully won't take longer than an hour or a few hours to implement, rather than sort of vague constructs or general advice or things that are more like write out a business plan, which is one of the things that we're going to advise doing against here, unless you actually need to get funding or need to get a loan or something like that. And today we're going to be talking about common business mistakes that you can make early on and how to avoid them, and why making mistakes is actually really good in the learning process, and why you should not be so afraid of making them to begin with. So with that, Ashkahn is going to be presenting with me, and my name is Graham. And we both run Float On, which is our collective business experience, but we've both done several other businesses before, and just a bunch of projects in the background too, and you just start to notice the same things come up over and over again when you do that. So I'll toss it to you to give kind of more.
Basically the plan for today is to go over some of the things you might miss out just to get set up that's really going to protect your business, down and dirty legal things, just some basic structures to get in place so that when you do make those mistakes that are part of the learning process, they're not just kind of like spiral out of control and take your entire business down with them. So hopefully we'll get the kind of really important nitty-gritty stuff down. And then also just put up some kind of red flags for things that a lot of people fall into as part of their kind of intuitive, like, oh, well, this is a business, I must do these things because they're businessy, and just tell you like which ones kind of are not important and don't really need to be done, and hopefully stop some pitfalls and common mistakes from happening in the kind of initial business startup phase for people. That's a little bit about the overview of our speech today.
Perfect. So in general, to do for the really important things that you just should get done, and it'll make your life easier in the long run. First off, just structuring things right. Things like getting a legal entity, which we recommend getting an LLC in Oregon just because it is so affordable and gives protection for you. Getting a DBA so that you can call your business what you want to instead of having LLC tossed after the name every single time. Getting an employer identification number. Those are like the three kind of really main basic things that you should do just right off the bat. Also things like bringing on a bookkeeper really early on, unless you really know how to keep your own books and how to keep everything in order and get it all set.
I just have a question. Do you have like a list of these things available?
Yeah, totally. We're going to be giving out a little handout for the workshop portion and actually going through some of them as well. Yeah, and we always post them up on the Cake website as well, so you'll be able to get access to them. Yes, don't worry about like jotting all this down immediately.
I should have brought another.
I know, right? Yeah.
Says the list maker.
And then so bringing on a bookkeeper is just it's always I get that to that point of bringing it on earlier and earlier every single project and every single business that I do, because the first one I did I just I didn't think about my taxes at all until it was time for the first tax season. I was like, oh my goodness, this is complete chaos. And then the second one about, once we kind of proved our concept, I brought it on, and now this Float On, we brought on a bookkeeper pretty early in the process, and it was still too late. Like, I wish we had them just from the day we started doing stuff. That's it. Definitely, and letting them know too what they need from you is really important. I've gotten in relationships with bookkeepers where tax time rolls around and I'm like, okay, so where are my books? And they're like, you haven't sent me any of the stuff that I need, and we just had never had that discussion of exactly what they needed from me, and that's caused problems as well.
The other thing too is just a real easy one is just look a little bit into an appropriate insurance for yourself. I mean, it takes an hour of kind of calling and looking around, and then you're just covered on a bunch of crazy things that could happen, and that's just something you won't have to deal with. or like worry about for a lot of weird, crazy little situations that come up. So it's a really easy, fast thing you can do to protect yourself a whole bunch. And it's like actually not that expensive.
Yeah, surprisingly expensive. Like the insurance for running a float tank place, which has like water and isolated rooms and everything.
Like an actual brick and mortar like location.
Yeah. It's only I think like around $600, $700 a year for the insurance that we have, which is pretty decent for coverage for what we have going on. So it's like much more I guess affordable than you might think for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, much more worth it.
Definitely. In general, when you're bringing on help, using independent contractors to start, this is like the gist of a lot of what we talked about last session at Cake during our employment section was use independent contractors, and if you do use employees, just go through a payroll company, unless you really, once again, it's kind of like bookkeeping, unless you know your stuff, they will like send you the right signs that you need, they'll tell you what all of the legal stuff is, they'll take care of the withholdings, they'll just do everything for you that you can really screw up. And when you're worried about everything else and kind of doing what it is that you love and turning that into a business, you just don't want to have to worry about all of that small stuff and making sure that you're right on par for all the legalities for that.
Yeah, there's just like a lot of holes you probably don't even like know to look for before you like talk to a bookkeeper, talk to a payroll person who's like, did you know you have to put posters up like with all these rules? You're like, what are you talking about? It's really like fast and easy like expertise will cover like a lot of research time for you in certain cases.
Definitely. Getting a bank account too, really early on is great. It just helps keep all of your accounting totally separate. Once you have the EIN and you've registered your business, it's really easy to get a bank account. And that's one of those things that'll, help a lot with protecting yourself and with piercing the veil. Right, so there's this thing like the company veil, the corporate veil that you don't want to get through because then you become personally liable for things. And so you want to make sure that you have as much in place early on so that your business is a separate entity from you yourself. And a bank account is going to do a lot to keep your finances separate and actually just prove if something goes wrong that the business is who's accountable and not you. And so those are kind of the like really nitty-gritty things that I just really wanted to breeze through and get all of those out in the open.
In terms of the bookkeeper aspect, do you recommend just like finding someone on Craigslist? Like how does that kind of thing work? Like you finding someone outside, who knows, that sort of thing.
Definitely. I've had good luck finding people on Craigslist. With Craigslist, the one that I found through there works really well. I just sent out an email to every single ad on Craigslist and found the 3 cheapest, and then got a hold of them and tried to find out why they were doing bookkeeping. And one was obviously just like doing it because she had a really wealthy husband and wanted to do something productive in her spare time, like charged it was like $20 an hour or something, $15 an hour for bookkeeping, and just had like drove in a really nice fancy car, was wearing all this really snazzy jewelry and like really newer stuff, and I was like, okay, you're the one for us. That's how we chose the bookkeeping for my tutoring business. And then the bookkeeper for Float On, we brought on through just one of our employees and volunteers who was helping out, and that's worked out really well.
He just mentioned one day, he's like, oh yeah, I used to do bookkeeping. I'm like, okay, great, we got some discussions there.
That's kind of connected. Awesome.
Yeah, and then there's also just always the passive like gram collection technique whenever you need anything, which is to just like every time that you end up in a conversation with someone, just say like, when someone says, hey, how are you doing? You say, oh good, but I'm looking for a bookkeeper. And it's amazing, like if you just do that every single conversation within a week, you usually are able to pick one up and get kind of whatever you need accomplished just by mentioning that every time.
I know a bookkeeper.
Anything else for the main series?
Yeah, that's kind of the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. That's all of the like really hardcore legal stuff. Just once you have that in place, you don't have to worry about like the government coming after you or someone suing you and just totally ruining your life. There's a bunch of other stuff too to do, just sort of for your own sanity and to help with the planning stages. So expect to mess up a lot, like we mentioned before. That's a really big one. Just a lot of things will go wrong, and the more you just accept that from the beginning, the more you can roll with the punches, and the more you can plan for hopefully, like I read a great article recently on just being a pessimist and the huge benefit of pessimism in our culture. Like, sure, great, hope for the best, but like pessimism helps you just plan for the worst, for everything that's going to go wrong, which there's some benefit to. Also, rushing to your first mistakes, like having everything planned out beforehand and knowing what you're going to do and exactly how you're going to do it and not launching until everything is perfect is just awful. And embracing those mistakes and really just rushing to your first customers and rushing to your first mistakes, I think is a way better way to get it right than any amount of planning you can do beforehand. So that's like an overview of what we're trying to get done there.
We would definitely want to encourage people to not worry about things like writing a business plan. That seems to be everyone's like go-to first step. Like, oh, you want to do a business? Well, you better write a business plan. And it's just kind of this like ominous, like huge, like word. You don't really know what goes into a business plan. You have to sit down and figure out all these like, what you're going to be doing in 5 years and all these things that are just so out there and like hard to predict that it's almost like a kind of exercise in futility. So our recommendation is just to hop straight into it. That's the best way you're going to understand like what you want in your business plan that you will like write eventually anyway, is to actually know how your business is interacting with the real world and what your actual goals are. And like, how better to find out the market than to actually be immersed in it and know what's going on. There's things like loans and investments and certain people who will want business plans from you, which you might have to kind of like tailor to them. But if you're just doing it for your own like kind of purpose and sanity, then it's really kind of like a big waste of time until you get like at least far enough in it to even have a good sense of what you want to put in it in the first place. So that's our recommendation. Kind of rush and get right to the business, and don't worry about writing up a bunch of documents that are going to completely change the moment you actually start your business and no one is ever going to read.
Definitely. And there's a couple of good cakes archived too on just how to kind of rush to that start and get straight to your customers too that are, you can look up online. Another one, name your product and business correctly. That's one that I just hear every single business interview that I hear with someone who's run a successful business. They're always like, what would you have done differently? And they're like, I probably would have chosen a different name right from the beginning. Like everyone's like, I don't know what I did. I just chose this name and I had to go with it, and it was too much of a hassle to switch. So I guess I'm just stuck with this thing. Even the company who I've listened to most of my business interviews on is named Mixergy, and I was just listening to one where he's like, I don't know why I did that. Like that was really dumb. Mixergy, it doesn't mean anything. Like what does this actually accomplish? So the three main things that you want to look for in a business name early on, just to make sure you don't mess it up, and whatever just sounds cool or whatever really jives with you, make sure at least it satisfies these, which is that it's easy to spell, you can actually get the domain for it in a reasonable way, and it doesn't have a ton of search competition. And so 2 of the 3 businesses that I have right now just totally fail in that regard, and Cake is one of them. Because if you're looking for cake in Portland, you're just going to find a bunch of cake companies. That's really hard. You have to look for cake small business, and then we pop up. Getting the domain, Float On is owned by a trailer company out in Florida, who just refuses to give it to us. The most reasonable thing we've had them say is that we can get it if we buy their entire company for several $1 million. So we're stuck with Float On PDX or Float HQ is what we go with right now. But I wish we'd been able to choose a company that we could just get it right off the bat. But those 3 will save you a lot of grief down the road, for sure.
Another thing that'll just help your general sanity is having a business partner. It's definitely a big step if you're doing everything by yourself right now, but it's something to really seriously consider. There's some reasons just having someone to bounce things off of is great. It's really hard to just keep everything in your head and know kind of what certain ideas are until you speak them out loud. So it's really wonderful to have someone to kind of just shoot ideas back and forth with. Also, someone to take a little bit of the load off of your back and make it more of a collective effort. It's easier to work when you're with someone else. There's just a lot of benefits that come to having a business partner, so it's really something that people should seriously consider. We have a little bit of advice is just to finding the right business partner. Float On goes against everyone's advice. We have 4 different owners of the business, and then we have no real problems with it. So it definitely is possible. But some things to look for is I think first and foremost, make sure that you and your business partner just are on the same page as human beings. Regardless of anything that has to do with business or anything I've met. You just know those people that you click with and are easy to be around, and communication's not a struggle. That's the most important thing. If you don't have that, nothing else is going to work.
It's true. Those people where you're just it's really easy talking to you, or wow, it just feels like I don't have to explain anything. Those are the kind of people you want as a business partner.
Absolutely.
Because every single interaction you have will compound, and the biggest time suck in the world is having to constantly explain more than you have to for every interaction. And you're partners, so for years, every single minor 5-second interaction, you're gonna have to give a little more effort to than you should, and that just is one of the biggest time sucks in the world.
You basically in business are spending your life trying to convince other people to think that your ideas are great, and the last thing you want is to also have to convince your business partner. You don't want every conversation to be a negotiation. You just want to be able to say something that you think is great, and then be yeah, it is a great idea. I know exactly what you're talking about. That's the best. Other than that, make sure they're in it for the same reasons as you. You know, if you're like, oh, I just really want to like build this community, and they're like, I'll make a bunch of cash. Conflict of interest at some point in there. So definitely like on a kind of philosophical level of what you want to do with your business, and what you want to like say to the world, and what kind of impact you want to have. Like, make sure that discussion is in there somewhere before you just get like, you know, involved with this person's life in a really significant way.
Definitely. Also, I mean, yeah, almost everyone who you hear, who you talk to will say get some kind of like legal signed agreement in place to begin with. Our advice with that too is like, don't get caught up with the legal details if it seems like you just have this idea and you're not even like in the testing phase yet and you just want to see if it works. But you can draw up in really just even plain English, really simple things that you guys are going to go by and kind of your basic divisions, and even have them like initial next to each point, for example. I don't know if like you'd suggest something like that. We can talk about that afterwards or if you have any input there. But I found that works really well. And like, if you just cover the big things, at least that stops something from like going really awry to begin with. And that way you don't have to worry about actually pulling on a lawyer to begin with, going through all this legal education for yourself, but you do have something in place. And then,
infringement, is that what you're saying?
what was that?
Are you talking about like copyright infringements?
Mainly for like actually having a partner on board, like when you're working with someone, it's great to be like, okay, let's do this company together, and then you launch into it.
Then you go opposite directions.
Yeah, or just you have something slightly different in mind. Having like at least something basic written out, and I guess don't if it seems daunting because you have to get a bunch of legal help, or you do have to just even find a template and understand what that template means before you sign it, and that's why you're not doing it, like, just write it up in plain English, initial next to it, and get something down, at least so you don't like hit a huge roadblock, like just as things are starting to get going for the business. And then if things actually do get going, that's when you can worry about sitting down and getting the contract all done right. Like once you're like, okay, we can actually do this for reals, we have like proof of concept, then you can worry about getting it legally sound.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost like infinite scenarios you can put into an operating agreement. You know, like, what if I do this and you have a kid and you move to Antarctica? Like, and you can write those all out, and then something in real life will happen that is like different than everything you had thought of or planned for. Like, real life is just too complicated for that. And things are just different in the moment, and like, you know, there's so much to take into account that it's really hard to sit down and think about all these theoretical situations. So our advice is just to like, you know, try to be reasonable in the moment, and tell them that. Tell them like, when things come up, let's just sit down and see what actually makes sense in the moment and work it out from there. And like, yeah, 99% of the time, like, as long as you show someone who's a decent person and your friend, like, you're not going to get into these crazy legal battles, you know? Like, it's just a human being and you're just trying to figure things out together.
Yeah, a good strategy, like I guess our advice if you need to find a partner is, once again, just talk about your business all the time, is what I suggest. Like, if you're actually looking for a partner, just every conversation you have, talk about it and mention that you're looking for a partner. And it's amazing how, like, much you might actually find someone who's on the same track, or someone be like, you should talk to this person who's also doing sensory deprivation or whatever it is, like, crazy business that you're doing. And
then just make sure, think a little bit about how the workflow will work between two people. Like, if you have a partner who you feel like you're going to be micromanaging all the time, like, that's not going to be the best idea, because that's not going to lessen your workload at all. If you have a partner, then you want to like agree on everything and talk about everything, but they live in a time zone that's 9 hours different than you, like, you're not going to get anything done. Like, you're just going to have to like schedule these phone conversations at 7:30 at night, like, so you can talk every day, and like make sure it's not going to stop you from being able to move real fast and being able to make decisions on the spot, and being able to like, not have it seem like a block in your like productivity, basically.
Definitely. Have money in reserve. And along with that too, we're going to talk about not eliminating your other income streams immediately when you're starting up a business too. It just like, most of all, it just eliminates the ability for you to fail. Like, if you don't have enough money in reserve, or if you don't have other income coming in, your money's running out, then like failure is just not an option in your life or for the business, and it puts way too much stress on you and the business, which is no good. Especially starting out, like we said, you should plan for failure and know that your business can fail, and know how you're going to learn for it and how you're going to modulate accordingly. And if you don't have that buffer space, or if you're not like, oh, well, it can fail and I can do this for another 3 months and I still have this part-time job that's bringing in at least enough money to keep me going for however long, then it's, I did that with my first business. I just straight out of school started one, and it was just immediately responsible for all of my living income. Which it pulled off, but it was really stressful. Like, way too stressed. After a year, I was just ready to pull on a partner. I also did it alone too. So like, alone plus having no funding was two of the big things I learned from WIM, my first business. And then not eliminating other income streams entirely. It also will force your actions. So even if you have a more intelligent decision to make in the business, but it's going to take like another 4 or 6 weeks or something to really implement, that also becomes not an option. So you're forced to concentrate on this short term, which is good in its own right, but we're not Cortez. Like, we don't actually have to burn our ships here. Like, we have other options that are way more reasonable, and I just think that, like, we're civilized human beings, we should just set it up and run with it once the business gets developed to a good point. I would say, like, for the cake advice, a good point for that is where it's bringing in about as much money as your other part-time or full-time job or whatever it is, or at least enough that you can live comfortably off of it for a little while or have enough in reserve, whatever the balance is there. Basically so that you're not stressed out about that, where you're going to be stressed out about everything else that is going right or wrong in your business at the same time.
Yeah, also your dead-end job that feels terrible, like, feels a lot better when there's kind of a deadline and it's somewhere, or like, oh, great, I'm going to get to quit this eventually, like, once this other business picks up. So it becomes a lot less miserable to, like, be in that job at the very least, so it's a little easier to hold on to.
Definitely. The next one's a really big one, too. I get this, like, all the time. It's probably the single biggest piece of business question that I get, which is, like, what if I'm talking about my business idea and someone, like, really thinks that it's good and just steals it early on? Like, how much should I be worried about that? And, like, I just say don't worry about it at all. Like, don't worry about people stealing your idea. I mean, protect it if it's strictly an information-based idea. I mean, you have a sense of when you should get a patent, and you can copyright things really easily. Like, you can protect yourself like that. But in general, don't worry about it. Like, people are really busy, especially in the entrepreneur, the investment industry. Like, they don't have time to go out and actually steal your business ideas. And if they did, and they can do it better than you, then, like, they probably deserve it more than you did. If like, anyone can go out and copy what you were going to do and, like, actually just make money and ruin your business as a result, then, like, you didn't have anything special, and you should probably just go back to the drawing board. So yeah, really don't worry. There's an entire conference devoted to it called the 99% Conference, which is around before 99% the Occupy, which is just all about 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. It's just like, it's 99% work. Like, your idea doesn't matter, basically. Derek Sivers, who did CD Baby, posted CD Baby just up online as an idea long before it was ever done, because he's like, my friends need this. And, like, no one did it just for 2 or 3 years, and he's done that with several others now, and, like, every time he's like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to do this then, and, like, make a lot of money, because it's really good. But yeah, it's really impossible. Like, if you just, and a good test of this is come up with, like, your second best idea and try to get people to steal it. Like, just go out there and try your best to announce it everywhere and get someone to, like, implement it as a business, and, like, it's impossible. It's impossible.
A good way to think about starting, because I know, like, starting a business can be very overwhelming, and it's great to think everything out and have these huge plans for down the road, but think about what you need to actually start, and it's usually not that much. You can usually start a lot smaller than you think you can, and that's really what you should be going for. Like, as soon as you hit that point where you're like, oh, well, all I need is, like, a truck and some sod, and I can start doing this, like, go for it, like, immediately. And that's actually going to make everything else easier. Like, just like everything else we're saying, real-life examples, getting out there and actually doing what you're trying to do are going to answer more questions than, like, every hour of sitting there and thinking things out theoretically is ever going to do. So just think about what you need to do to start as small as you can, and just start immediately and get to that point. And a lot of the path will just kind of make itself clear from there. It's a lot easier to see it when you kind of just step right onto it.
Totally. And a good example of that, too, we've gone over this in past cakes, but, like, how we started with Float On, it's like, okay, we want to start a float tank center. And you can think about starting like that for a business, and then you have to get all ready and raise all this money and get something going. It's like, okay, well, maybe we'll start with one tank and start small and just sort of build up from there and see if there's a following. And then from there, it's like, well, why do we even need a tank? There's like at least 1 or 2 other places that have float tanks in town. Why don't we sell floats to their place and see if we can just get people to get engaged and buy floats in the first place and test the market that way, and then, if that works, then we'll get float tanks. And then it's like, well, why do we need to get someone to buy something at first? Why don't we just see if, like, we can talk to people and get them to sign up for a mailing list where we give them information about floats? Then we're like, why do we even need a mailing list? Why don't we just see if we can have people talk to us for 5 minutes about float tanks at random parties? And, like, that will be how we start. So, like, you can always bring it back a step, like, nothing is too small. Like, that's how we started. We just had to, like, 5-minute conversations, which turned into, like, half-an-hour conversations at every single party we were at. And we're like, okay, this is legitimate. People are really down for this. And then kind of, like, escalated it from there. So, yeah, start way, way smaller than you think you have to.
Along with that is choosing one thing and really focusing on doing that one thing, right? Rather than trying to implement, like, your grand vision and all the little branches that come out of it all at once. It's going to allow you to focus on it. It's going to allow you to do that thing better, which is really nice. Instead of doing, like, 10 things mediocrely, like, doing one thing better is going to help like get you a customer base and get people really interested in what you're doing and make you seem like you really have like your shit together. So definitely think about what that one thing is and focus on that. Put all of your effort into that and see how far you can actually take it before kind of overwhelming yourself with a bunch of sub projects that come off of that.
Food carts are like a great example of this, especially things like Whole Bowl or things that just do one thing and do it really well. Restaurants that have like 300 things on the menu do this really poorly. That's like a terrible example of that. When you go and you can order like sushi or pasta or hamburgers, and you're just like, okay, like I do not trust that all of these are going to be done of a certain quality.
Yeah, it just gains you credibility too.
Right?
They really like. If people just think that someone that does only one thing does that one thing better than like other people who do many things.
A great example of that is Whole Bowl on Hawthorne.
Yep, Whole Bowl is great. Yep.
Like one bowl of delicious things, and they have a huge following.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
And they're delightful. Yeah.
It's also just like easier to you don't like overburden yourself and stretch yourself too thin.
Yeah. In addition, yeah, that's one of those things for your own sanity. Like, it's hard enough doing one thing, especially when you're just starting a business. Like, businesses who have multiple product lines and are doing all these crazy things have a ton of workers and have been around for a while. Like, when you're starting, just start really small and get that right. Toyota also started with little scooters instead of cars, like just like nailed that and figured out how to do stuff with those and then built up from there. Yeah.
Along the same lines as of this is in terms of thinking about like your company policies or kind of some of the more hardcore organizational structure projects you want to do. Those are all also things that you don't really necessarily need to fully flesh out before you actually just jump right into them. 9 out of 10 times, the problems you think were just going to be happening every day, like, never pop up. Your employees will just, like, not interact with that system the way you were thinking they were going to. And then, like, 100 things happen that you never would have thought of. So it's much better to just start as simple as you can. Really think about simplicity and what are the very basic things to make this function, and let it grow organically. There's a lot to be said about the kind of, like, organic business structure and just letting, like, the world kind of develop the way things work and your policies around them. And then once you have some time to see how, this project you're doing or these like policies, the rules you want, or the way you want people to interact with things is going in the real world, then you can start making policies that'll help optimize them and make them better and make them move faster and make them do more what you want them to do. Rather than just like putting up crazy fences that things are going to run into before like anyone has the chance to be like, oh, it's not even a problem. So definitely, keep yourself out of the bureaucratic cycle and make sure you don't get like overburdened and weighed down by a bunch of meaningless policies you came up with before like anything actually happened in the real world.
Totally. Like, yeah, we started up with Float On and we were like, oh boy, okay. Like, the first day we closed, we were like, we don't have a broom or a mop. And, like, we did not plan ahead for this. Like, we don't have a utility sink back here. One of the doors does not open to one of the rooms because the hinges are backwards for how it needs to be to get in there. And, like, we did. We, like, went down to the store and bought a broom and a mop and, like, switched the hinges on the door and had someone put in the utility sink within a week. And it's like, okay, great, we got that taken care of. And it was way more efficient to do it that way with everything else we had to worry about than to make giant lists and make sure every single thing was taken care of beforehand. So yeah, sometimes it's better to just launch into it and you know what the really important things are. Like, yeah, if you're doing like some kind of crazy like fire taming trick, like, okay, like maybe I'm going to wax my mustache with the fire retardant mustache wax that time. Like, what things are going to actually cause you serious problems.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else on that one?
The other important thing I think to take away from that, especially when you're dealing with other people or like employees or anyone else, is just to like trust them. Like, human beings are smart and they're responsible, and they will be as responsible as you let them be. So if you have a bunch of like policies and rules and things to stop people from like cheating you and doing this and that, that's like people are going to react to that in a very like they're going to try to break those rules and they're going to try to fight against that and they're going to try to steal from you. So the best thing to do is just to like trust people and let them know that you trust them and let them know that like you think they're responsible and that they should like go off of what they think is the right thing to do. And most of the time, like, people live up to that. Like, human beings are really impressive creatures, and like to put a bunch of rules and restrictions on them meaninglessly kind of like makes you feel like a robot, and no one wants to feel like a robot.
Yeah.
So let people be like their best selves, I guess.
Definitely. Another big one is not planning to replace yourself in your own business eventually. Like, launch it out. I made that mistake on like the first 2 businesses or something that I did. It was like I went in and I'm like, okay, I do this one thing and I do it really well. And 6 months into it, I'm like, I'm still just doing this every single time that it needs to get done. And it's just getting repetitive now. And then like a year in, I'm just like, okay, like how do I even get out of this? Like I don't even know. And I just hadn't planned at all for having a passive income stream or having someone replace some of the lower level tasks I was doing. And so planning for your own inevitable exit from the business if you want that. And if you do want to be tied in, planning to get all of the menial things that you don't like doing taken care of so that you can work on the stuff that actually motivates you is really important early on. And the more that you think about that early too, like you don't have to actually get out of it really early on, but think about how it's going to eventually look, I guess. And my cake tip for that one is just don't spend too much time at the beginning documenting your processes and like getting it all ready for your own replacement, just because those are going to change a ton. But as you get a little further, and every time you perfect something, you're like, yes, I've been doing it this way for a while. This is totally the best way to do this for right now. Document it. Just write it down whenever you like reach that perfect level of something, and eventually like you'll have everything written down that you do and be able to send them in. And if you don't do that too early when you're still shifting everything around, then it won't waste you a ton of time as well.
Yeah, things definitely change real fast. I think we went from cleaning our rooms and the float tanks from like mops to like a gigantic squeegee to like just big towels to like now we have this whole sponge system and then like a 2 sponge system. And like, yeah, we could have written up that entire procedure like 6 or 7 times by now and just had to trash it every time and we found a better solution.
Organic evolution.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Exactly, that'll just save you time.
Yeah, you want to tackle the next one?
The other thing is when it comes to little kind of like professional projects that you think you need to hire someone outside for, spend just like half an hour Googling it. A lot of times you'll find that that's actually not the case at all. It's totally something you could do yourself. Especially starting out, it's going to save you a lot of money. That's where a lot of money comes in, is when you're like paying someone to do something. We had at some point when we were setting up, we had a big shower that couldn't fit through our door. And so we knew we needed to take one of our windows out so we could get the shower through and then put the window back on. So we hired this company to come out. And these 2 guys come, and this guy takes a hammer and takes off like 4 little pieces of wood around the window frame, and then takes like a $15 suction cup and holds the window and takes it off. And then just like puts it back and hammers it back in, and we paid like $150 for that. I was like, okay, that was it? That was all you did? Like, okay.
You paid for the knowledge and experience.
I mean, I guess, but like, there's also the internet, which is just like bountiful knowledge.
How you take off a giant window, and we like looked it up afterwards, and we're like, we totally could have done that.
Yeah. The toilet was leaking.
Yeah, I mean, there are, like, it's not to say that there are not things, like, I mean, we had to replace our, like, breaker box for, we spent, like, 30 minutes Googling it, we're like, yeah, can't do this ourselves, like, we're gonna kill ourselves.
Yeah.
We have no idea what to look at.
They'll just throw you into the wall.
Totally.
But I think the point to take away is, like, just that initial half an hour period is gonna let you know which one of those 2 things it is. And a lot of times you won't expect it to be something you can do yourself, and it turns out to be really easy. And for 30 minutes on the internet, like, you figure that out, like, that's gonna save you a good amount of time. It's also going to let you know, it's going to teach you something. So if that breaks again, you're going to know how to repair it. You're not going to have to call that same person back again. And it also lets you know how it works, so that if you open a second store, you need to do this better, you can know how to improve it, even an understanding of the system. At the very least, if you find out that it is something you need to hire someone for, even spending that little amount of time researching something will help you like find the right person to do the job for you. You'll know what to look for in someone, and like an electrician or who you're trying to hire on to bring this task. You'll just have a little knowledge of the industry. That's going to help a lot in just like finding the right professional for you in the first place.
Definitely.
And a little strategy for that too that works really well for me is I'll sometimes make just a big list of different people in town. Like when I wanted to, when we were trying to print a book, I made just a list of like 12 different printing companies in town. And I just called the first one with no information at all. I didn't know anything. And I just apologized. Be like, I'm so sorry. Like, I have a lot of stupid questions to ask you. Like, I'm just going to ask, like, what is this? And then by the 12th phone conversation, I just sounded like I was, like, in the industry. I was like, I'm really going to need a CPU glue for that in my Butteridge binding. And like, I just found out, actually, everything that was involved in the process through talking to these people and got, like, 12 different price quotes along the way.
And when you just say you're an idiot, or like you're going to ask a ton of stupid questions, it's amazing how much people will just tell you. Like, I'm really sorry, this is probably going to take a while, it's just going to sound really dumb, is usually how I precede all of those questions, and it works incredibly well. Like, people will just spend forever on the phone with you.
So did your price quotes get successively lower with the smarter you
I don't know. I have to look back there. I probably did. A guy was trying to get cheated list. Like, oh, we this kind of glue. I'm like, that's unacceptable, you know?
On this note, something that you guys have been mentioning a few times is that when you reach a challenge, instead of reaching to the first thing, which is a lot of people, they'll hire professionals that deal with these challenges all the time. I've found that professionals cost a lot of unnecessary money, and if you spend honestly, even 10 minutes of just asking your close personal friends, you'd be surprised at how diverse this city has. Like, I have friends that know how to do everything, and I've never had to ask a professional to do anything for me, and 9 times out of 10, I can either negotiate a trade with them somehow and not even have to pay the money, and they're more than welcome, more than excited to help you answer any questions or fix anything, and they're professionals at doing it. And you're like, oh, that's funny, you need help with my profession, I need help with your profession, and look, we're helping each other, it's local, and we're not using money. That's
it's true.
Yeah,
it's one of the really nice things about Portland specifically. There are a lot of like craftspeople of like all different caliber too, from really professional
And
down to
really
like
artistic
literal,
help.
just like artistic craftsy people. And that's true. That's how we found the majority of people who either like through our customers or just through our friends. Yeah, has been most of our
Networking
contractors.
is the
Yeah.
greatest
And that's
tool.
another thing, just like saying it to everyone. You know, even if it's like a really weird, I just need to get my breaker box replaced. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, I did that. I replaced breaker boxes specifically for 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome, great.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up again. Education. I won't talk about this one too much. We made a few notes on them. The biggest thing that I'll say is that reading books and like getting yourself educated on a lot of things, I'd choose a couple sources for those, a couple avenues you want to pursue, and mainly just learn by doing, especially really early on in the process when you're just starting out. Like, it helps when you reach specific issues, and just in general, always having background learning is great going on. But you can get really, just like you can get caught up in having your business be absolutely perfect before you actually launch it. You can get really caught up in trying to learn and know everything about doing a business before you actually do it. And same thing, it's just kind of the common theme. Same for getting all of your policies in place before you've actually started your business and know how it's going to run. There's this weird like jumping the gun thing that we really want to do because we're afraid of failure, essentially. And same with learning. It's, I think, another one of those fear of failure. So if you're reading books and learning things and you're not actually implementing that knowledge immediately, then cut those things out of your learning regimen. And if you are going to learn, then first learn how to learn things effectively. Learning about speed reading, learning about knowledge retention and memory. I have a few things that I recommend. Study Hacks is a great blog to check out if you haven't done that. Cal Newport is the guy's name who does it. And he's just all about how to lead a really happy life, and how to learn effectively is a big part of that. 4-Hour Workweek is a classic. That's just like really effective ways to get things done. Just a book on speed reading. There's like one that's considered the standard on speed reading, which is like 10 lessons over the course of like 10 days or something on how to speed read. And our cake workshops also, hopefully, are really down and dirty, and we have a lot of those archived now, / all of our workshops since we started. This is the 20th one now, since the beginning of the year. So that's, the brief little thing on education. Is just like, it's great, and you should always be educating yourself, but don't get too caught up in it.
Some more tips on just kind of launching rough and early is don't be a perfectionist necessarily either. It's another one of those things where like you can get everything perfect with your product or whatever you're trying to give to people, and then put it out in the world, and it's just not at all like what you eventually want it to be. So get beta products out there, get things that you're working on out there. Just get things in people's hands, because that's going to be like the fastest way to perfect something and like launch that learning curve as fast as you can.
Definitely. And just know that like early on when you're deciding to buy things for your business or your space, whether you're going to be using them or your customers are going to be looking at them, or it's furniture or whatever it is, if you go with the cheapest option, plan on replacing it relatively soon. That's something I've learned just over and over again. And I'm always tempted too, even when I read the like good Amazon reviews and it's like, no, this thing does pretty well for its price. That means that like it'll last for a little longer than it would otherwise. But like things in a business setting are just way different than a personal setting.
Yeah.
You know, like I can buy the cheapest thing personally, and I just use it so rarely. You know, like some kind of like crazy printer that I need to do something. It's like, okay, well I'm going to use that to do like a personal project maybe once every week, or print out some pages. In a business, that printer is just getting hammered every single day with like 75, 100 documents, whatever it is, even in your small business. And it's just ridiculous. Like, they take so much more of a beating. So definitely I'd go for like second tier up, or maybe even like tier above that, for if you're going for cheap options for things. Or if you just really need to get it launched and you don't have any money to start with, just budget into your budget. That's going to have to be replaced a little further on when you do have a little more money too.
And when you do get those cheap things, it's great to use as a test to see like what you actually want out of that product. It's really hard to know like what you want out of a laminator until you get a cheap one. You're like, oh, this paper's coming out so hot, it's burning me. And it's like, oh yeah, cool paper. So actually having a cheap version of something is going to make you a lot better at like choosing the nicer one that you do want. So when you do get things like that, make sure you're learning it or using it as a learning process.
Definitely. This is a small tip. Just keeping perspective, like as you get insulated in your field, it's usually easy to be paying attention to all of the businesses around you. And when you're doing that, your field seems like it's moving really fast, and it seems like you're always playing catch up. There's always someone launching something new, and there's always like, it seems like your field is the one that's exploding. And that's really hard to get perspective filling in on. Like, I learned that one with my treasure hunting business only now, like 5 years later, after I started it. When I first started, I was like, okay, and I'd been in it for 6 months, and I was just like, this thing is going insane. Treasure hunts are going to be everywhere. I need to design custom adventures way faster than the other. And like 5 years later, it's like, no, it's about the same. It's about the same market. Like, I was just paying way more attention to the news, and our human brains react really strangely to that. We kind of take like the average of information coming in. So as soon as you enter an industry, like that average gets immediately skewed. Yeah, and then the other one is also just competitors are less together than they seem, and if it's hard for you, then it's going to be hard for everyone else. Like, if any step of the way you're just, like, struggling to get through, know that when you get through it, like, everyone else is going to hit that same struggle. That's a classic. Seth Godin, The Dip, pretty much covers that. It's a really good read, too. It's like a short little 100-page business book. It's just, like, super inspirational. It's basically like, keep going for it! So if you ever get down, yeah, The Dip is a really good one to read.
Another small tip, if you have trouble, like, kind of setting deadlines for yourself or like, meeting those deadlines that you're setting. One of our tactics is just to kind of make it a deadline that we share with the public, and then we pretty much have to do it. Like we really want to get this like book published and ready. We just like plan a book release party, and it's like on this day, and like you pretty much no choice but to get it ready at that point. That like puts a fire under your ass. So if you have any trouble like meeting deadlines or helping productivity, like just make it a shared deadline with the world, and like you're going to be way more motivated.
Totally. Document your processes as you go along. It's going to be fun to look at later. It's great for social media and for your Twitter. And honestly, like going back, it's really nice to learn from things that you've done. Or even sometimes you just had random reference photos where we're like, oh shoot, how did our shop look at this time? Or like, when did we make this switch? And we can like go back to photos we just personally taken and see when those changes happened. And it's amazing how often that's been useful. So documentation comes in really handy.
In terms of advertising, we want to talk a little bit about advertising. Just as like a very early business starting out, it doesn't seem to be as useful as you might expect it to be.
Don't pay for advertising.
So spending money on it, especially when you don't have that much money and you're really starting out, is probably not the most effective use of your money.
Don't pay for advertising.
Ads just in general are becoming less effective, like, just as advertising in itself.
Yeah, I really suggest not paying for advertising.
You can take that same amount of money that you would have paid for it and probably do something like awesome that's going to get people talking about things, or like, making that like really cool improvement to your product, or you can just use it so much better like as an early business than to put it up like in a little clipping in a newspaper that like is not going to do anything and no one's going to read.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a now famous quote from a few years ago from Fast Company magazine, I think it was, which was that in the future marketing is going to be like sex, only the losers pay for it. Which I think is just actually getting truer and truer, in the sense that like social media and so many venues now promote something so big, and there's so many avenues where once something gets big somewhere, then other people can pick it up, and we've already started seeing that with our float tanks as well, and doing projects instead of... What was that?
Twitter is a good example.
Yeah, Twitter, absolutely, yeah.
They just showed up in a space.
Definitely, and there's Craigslist, there's like just getting to the top of Google and focusing on your search engine optimization instead of your search engine marketing. There's so many ways to get in front of people's eyes, especially if you're a niche product, and especially if you're concentrating on that one thing and doing that one thing right. The person who needs that one thing is going to have a good time finding you. So yeah, early on in advertising, a lot of times too, it's like you need the general rule, like in sales, you'll hear that you're supposed to hear no 7 times before you give up on something. Or there's kind of like this idea of touch points or points of contact where you have to see an advertisement or a product around 7 times before you like actually really start to trust it or recognize it. So if you're a small business that's just starting out with some unknown product and you like take out an ad somewhere and it costs you money, like that's not going to generate 7 points of contact. Like the ads you see for a lot of big businesses are taking advantage of that and taking advantage of the fact that like someone will see that and mention it to someone who's in the car because they already used that product. Yeah.
Yeah, I've often found that I mistrust ads more than I would rather just like, if I hear it from someone that's good, it's like, oh, I see this all the time, It's like, oh, they must be doing well enough to afford an ad, and they just want, more because they have an ad out. But it's like, if I hear it from someone else, then it's like, oh, I actually had a really good experience. That's a human telling me that it was a really good experience instead of just, this is an ad describing this really good experience, and we're trying to convince you that it's a good experience.
Totally.
So the ad is a convincing, where a person just saying it, a testimony is like, any kind of promoting thing is better than that.
Absolutely, and it's so much easier to get access to those nowadays. Yeah, and every single time that I've gone against this and like somehow been talked into it, it has never gone well. None of the ads I've ever taken out for any of my small businesses have actually yielded like a positive ROI. Like the most I've gotten is people being like, "Oh, I saw your ad. Like, nice job having an ad in that paper." And I'm like, "Really? Like, that's what I could ever?" It's just like, "Oh, nice ad." Like, yeah, that pretty much sums that up.
We had one float tank manufacturer who we were talking to who said he think he paid like $1,500 for this ad that was going to be run in all these different like these magazines that were being mailed out to people, and he got 3 phone calls from it. And all 3 people were asking him how that ad went because they were considering getting ads in that magazine. And so literally, like, that was it. It was just like a complete waste of money.
Yeah.
And that said, if you do want to use ads, make sure you can measure the results. And my suggestion for taking out any kind of print ad in like a magazine or newspaper is to use an advertorial, where it just essentially looks like an article and says, this is an ad. But you've written an interesting article. And the key there is to actually generate good content. And we'll talk more about that later on some section on advertising. You can look up advertorials and the thing behind it. But anything that I have seen be mildly successful has used that as well. Last thing is social. Is that the last thing?
Yeah.
Last thing is social media.
Just a couple little tips on that. We have another cake section that goes into a little more in depth. But it's just like a topic that comes up a lot and is one of those little things that everyone's trying to figure out. Don't spend too much time on it, especially in this early stage when you have like so much on your plate and so much other stuff that you need to get done. Like you shouldn't be spending 5 or 6 hours a day like trying to boost your social media. Like that time can be way better spent like actually working on your product and the things that need to get done immediately.
Totally. And when you do use it, once again, it's kind of like the ad thing. It's like, okay, so you're going to like spend a lot of time on social media. Focus on the number of personal interactions you have with people and the amount of times you're actually like individually messaging people or responding to posts, and that should be your metric by which you gauge social media success, rather than number of likes or number of overall page views or number of retweets or anything like that. Number of personal interactions and amount of engagement you have, I think, is a way better metric to go by. And an easier thing to make it like your time there actually useful, because then you're one-on-one just communicating with people directly, which is awesome, instead of measuring some weird vanity metrics. And that's pretty much it for the common business mistakes we wanted to share with you. There's a lot more, and the workshop section, we were thinking about just kind of tossing it to you guys too and seeing what you've run across in starting businesses, and if you have anything that we missed or anything that we've said where you've just had the exact opposite experience. You're like, no, that's completely wrong. Like, I've done this as a small business and it's just completely succeeded or failed. And I guess also just a little rehash of things. The main thing, hopefully, that we're getting across here is there are a few big things you actually really do need to get taken care of, like to cover your legal ass. You know, get yourself formed, get yourself an employer identification number, make sure your books are in order, you have insurance if you need it, things like that that'll actually just really protect you. A lot of the other stuff, just rush as fast as you can through it and get right to the failing part as cheaply and as quickly as possible, because it's probably going to happen anyway, and so like that way at least you waste the least amount of time and money in figuring out what to do. And yeah, just really every single step of the way pushing that speed and that economy as well is really what we urge pretty much. Anything else you had to add to that?
Fail big and learn from it.
Awesome. Big mean big lessons.
Great, and we're going to take just a little 5 or 10 minute break right here and then come back for the workshop portion, which we will be doing live too, so feel free to tune back in, you audience viewers. And then I guess before we break, any questions from the stream at all that we had?
No, it's all good.
Okay, awesome. In that case...
You mentioned LLC, and then you mentioned one other acronym after that.
DBA.
DBA.
Doing business as.
Doing business ads? What is that?
$50 piece of cake.
Yep, exactly. Takes like 15 minutes. It just means
Oh,
that you
that's
can
good
use
to
that as your business name.
When you get an LLC, you definitely want to use one of those.
Right.
You don't necessarily want to have LLC and all. I mean, I do, but.
Right.
So your company name and then DBA?
No,
I'm sorry.
you can cover it actually. Are we off the?
Yeah.
Okay, we can keep it live. I actually like it. Yeah, let's
You're
have it.
legally required to let people know that the company you're forming is can't pierce your personal assets. So when you do a corporation, you're supposed to say corp, or when you do an LLC, you're supposed to have the initials LLC. That lets people know that if something goes south in the contract, they can't come after you personally. They can only go after the assets of your company. So they promptly created a rule to get entirely around that issue, and they let you file something for a company just like you can for a person with a sole proprietorship called a doing business as name. And if you have a doing business as name, it's like you could call yourself like Raven Nightworks Productions or something, and you could be a sole proprietorship, but then you could use it on your business card. So let's say you have an LLC, Raven Nightwork Production LLC, and you just want to call it Raven. You could do a DBA as Raven for your Raven Nightworks LLC, and then you put Raven on your business cards.
Cool.
Yep.
Way cool.
Good to know.
And it's kind of
And it's only
standard.
$50 to do that after you have your LLC.
Yep, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
kind of standard practice for a
And how much is the LLC?
100 or 150 in Oregon. What is it for an LLC?
100.
100,
We're like
yeah.
one of the cheapest states.
I knew there was 150. Yeah, 150 or 200 total for the complete thing.
A year.
For that.
Recommend for what?
To apply for it.
Okay, and looks like we're going to answer a few other questions. Just kind of start talking off camera a little bit here. So goodbye, you viewers, and see you in like 5 or 10 minutes.